I'm Mara Ellison, 33 freelance illustrator and the daughter no one remembered. The front entrance of Memorial View Hospital gleamed under the late afternoon sun, glass doors parting with a quiet whoosh as people shuffled in and out. I stood there, just outside the revolving entrance, gripping a wrinkled paper coffee cup so hard the lid caved in. The security guard didn't look up from his clipboard. Only immediate family allowed past this point. He said flatly, "I am family." I replied, my voice thinner than I meant it to be. He barely blinked. "Not on the list. You'll have to wait outside, behind the glass." I saw my cousin Jen walk briskly down the hallway, holding a tote bag with my mother's initials embroidered on the front. She didn't glance in my direction. A moment later, the doors hissed shut again, swallowing the view and sealing me out of whatever was happening behind them. The sidewalk was too clean, the planter too bright with summer blooms, and the wind too warm for a day that felt this cold. "I'm her daughter," I murmured, but to no one. Not even the guard was listening anymore. It had been 2 days since I'd found out Mom was in the hospital 2 days too late. Not from a phone call, not from family. I found out from a neighbor's Facebook post under a photo captioned, "Prayers for Louise." I texted Jen. No reply. I texted my older brother, Simon. "It's complicated right now." He answered, "Let's talk next week." That was all I got. My own mother admitted to a hospital less than 20 minutes from my apartment, and I was standing on the outside of the glass, coffee cup crushed, breath tight, and the world around me treating me like I was no one. If you've ever been through something like this, left out, ignored when it mattered most, drop a comment or let me know where you're watching from. Hit like or subscribe if family drama ever made you feel invisible too. I turned to leave, the soles of my boots clapping against the concrete with deliberate calm. When I heard someone say my name, Ms. Ellison, I turned. A woman in a gray suit approached, holding a clipboard and a badge that read, "Estate Administration Services." "I've been looking for you," she said. Her voice was calm but firm. "Your presence has been formally requested by your mother." The security guard stood straighter. "She's asked for you by name," the woman continued. "And she left everything to you. Her entire estate." I didn't speak. I couldn't. The wind carried a sudden hush through the hospital's open lobby as the words settled in the air like dust. A woman sitting on the bench turned her head. A man paused mid-sip of his water. Even the security guard's brows lifted slightly. And then came the silence, that weighty, unbelievable silence when every eye in the room tilted toward me, and I could feel it happening. The shift. I didn't walk through the hospital doors, I floated. That's how it felt. My feet moved, but I wasn't inside my body. I followed the woman in the gray suit, her heels clicking against the polished floor as we moved past the nurse's station. She didn't say much, just asked me to leave my coffee on the counter and handed me a visitor's badge, room 422. The numbers seared into my mind like coordinates on a map I never thought I'd need. My mother's name was taped on the door in tiny black letters, Louise Ellison. She looked small, not fragile, just reduced somehow. Her once commanding posture had shrunk into the pillows, but her eyes still had that sharpness, that clarity, that judgment. "You came," she said. It wasn't a welcome. It wasn't relief. Just 3 syllables carved in stone. "I did," I replied, standing in the doorway like I was trespassing. The nurse adjusted a monitor and slipped out quietly. My mother's gaze didn't leave mine. "I wasn't told," I said carefully. "No one told me you were here. That doesn't surprise me." "Why not?" She blinked slowly, the same way she did when she used to skim my drawings at the kitchen table, finding the flaws before the forms. "They think I hate you," she said. I stayed silent. They're wrong, she added, softer now. But I let them think it. That made me laugh, bitterly, involuntarily. So it's true. Then, I wasn't wanted. You weren't wanted at the dinner tables they sat at, but that doesn't mean you weren't wanted here. She patted the edge of the bed. Come sit. Don't just stand there like a ghost. I stepped in slowly, eyeing the IV in her hand, the beeping monitor, the lemony antiseptic smell of the room. Her hair was grayer than I remembered, but pulled back in the same tight twist she always wore. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for a glass of water. I'm sorry, she said, after a long moment. I should have called you myself, but I didn't know how much time I had. I didn't want to spend it explaining things to people who already made up their minds. Her voice cracked, just slightly. I hadn't heard that crack in years. I thought you didn't want to see me, I said quietly. I didn't want you to see me like this. I lowered my eyes, unsure what to say. I was angry at your choices, she continued. Not because they were wrong, but because they weren't mine. I met her eyes. That was as close to an apology as I'd ever get. And the will I asked? I didn't want them to win. She said bluntly, they already took enough. My name, my decisions, you. My throat tightened. I wasn't prepared for any of this. Not the sudden inheritance, not the reckoning, not this strange, tender final scene playing out between us. I thought you forgot about me, I said. She closed her eyes, the corners wrinkling. I remembered you every day. The nurse knocked softly and poked her head in. We have to run a scan now. Miss Ellison. I stood. My mother opened her eyes again. Come back tomorrow. I nodded. I will. As I stepped out of the room, Jen was waiting, arms crossed, cold smile. Wow, she said. Nice entrance. Always did know how to show up late and get the spotlight. I didn't know, I answered. No one told me. Maybe there was a reason for that. Like what? Jen. That I wasn't part of the club anymore. She narrowed her eyes. You left. You stopped coming to holidays. You chose your little apartment and your art and your freedom. I chose sanity. That hung between us for a beat too long. You think you're better than us now? No. I just stopped trying to win a game I was never invited to play. She snorted and walked away, heels clicking hard. The sound reminded me of our childhood, of her always a step ahead, always chosen to carry the casserole, always the first to speak during grace. I leaned against the wall outside the elevator, the gray-suited woman from earlier approaching again. She wanted you to see this, she said, handing me a sealed envelope, heavy, cream-colored. My name, Mara, written in that slanted cursive only Mom had. I opened it in the elevator. It wasn't a letter. It was the deed to her house, her will, her instructions, all signed, notarized, witnessed. She had rewritten everything 3 weeks ago, after her diagnosis, after they told her there wouldn't be time for second chances. She didn't leave them anything. No jewelry, no bonds, no sentimental heirlooms. Just my name, in black ink, repeated line after line. To my daughter, Mara Ellison. I leave. Everything. The next morning, I brought one of my sketches, an old one she'd never seen, a pencil drawing of her hands in her sewing room, from memory. I didn't know if she'd like it. I just knew I needed her to see it. But when I arrived, the nurse at the station gave me that look, that soft, practiced look that precedes the words you don't want to hear. I'm so sorry, she said. She passed early this morning, peacefully. I didn't speak. I just nodded, as if I'd heard the weather forecast. The envelope crinkled in my coat pocket. They let me into the room anyway. It felt wrong that she wasn't there. The sheets were too smooth, the silence too still. But there was a photo of us on the nightstand. One I hadn't seen in years, me in her lap. Age 4, covered in finger paint. Her smiling. She had framed it. It was the only photo in the room. I sat on the edge of the chair, holding the sketch I never got to give her. My hands trembled as I folded it and placed it under the pillow. You don't get do-overs, just revelations. Outside the window. Traffic continued. Birds flitted on the roof ledge. Somewhere, someone was being born. I stood up, slow and steady, and stepped out of the room. Jen was in the hallway again. This time her expression wasn't cold, it was confused. She hadn't expected it to be real. She left it all to you, she asked, as if hearing the words aloud would change them. Yes, I said. And for once, I didn't feel the need to explain. By the time the funeral was scheduled, word had gotten around. I didn't post about the inheritance. I didn't flaunt it. But things like this always leak, especially in families like mine, where everyone whispers but no one speaks plainly, where eyes say more than mouths, and silence is its own form of warfare. The service was held at St. Paul's Chapel, the one with the stained glass windows my mother always loved, even after she stopped going to church. I arrived early, dressed in black, clutching a folded program with her name embossed in silver, Louise Margaret Ellison, 1954-2024. Inside, the pews were slowly filling with faces I recognized from holidays, childhood birthdays, and awkward Thanksgiving dinners. My Uncle Charles nodded at me with tight lips. My cousin Rebecca gave me a quick, automatic hug like she was checking a box. Jen didn't look at me. Neither did Simon. I sat in the second pew, not the front. That was still reserved for what they considered her family, even though the will told another story entirely. I kept my head down. When the pastor began the eulogy, it was a sanitized version of Mom, a beloved mother, a generous neighbor, a woman of grace, not false, just incomplete. There were no mentions of her sharpness, her precision, the way she could cut a person down with one sentence and then feed them soup the next day. The pastor didn't mention me either, as if I was a guest, as if I hadn't been there in her final hours, as if the deed in my name was invisible. After the final hymn, people rose and shuffled slowly into the reception hall next door, tables lined with finger sandwiches and butter cookies. Jen stood near the punch bowl like a gatekeeper. Simon was talking with 2 men from their law firm. I hovered near the coat rack, half considering slipping out, but then I felt a hand on my shoulder. Mara, is that you? I turned. Mrs. Dellinger, our old next-door neighbor, stood there, wearing a wide-brimmed black hat and clutching a faded handbag. Her eyes were kind, and her voice was cracked with age. I always hoped I'd see you again, she said, squeezing my hand. Your mother talked about you. Not often. But when she did, she sounded proud. She did? I asked, genuinely stunned. Oh yes, showed me one of your book covers once, said. My daughter drew that. Even cut it out of a magazine and framed it on her sewing room wall. I blinked. I didn't know that. She kept things close to the chest, she said. But she watched from afar. That sentence stuck with me. Watched from afar. Maybe that's what mothers do when they don't know how to reach back in. They watch from a distance and leave crumbs. Photos, articles, sketches, phone numbers they never dial. As we talked, I saw Jen approaching out of the corner of my eye, her steps slow, calculated. So you're staying in the house. Then she said, voice low and edged, I haven't decided yet. I answered, well, just so you know, A lot of what's in there belongs to the family. Grandma's china, the piano, the silver flatware. You'll need to coordinate with us. I'll go through everything. I replied calmly. Anything with shared meaning can be discussed. Her eyes narrowed. Suspicious. Just don't throw away history because you're playing heiress now. I looked at her for a long moment. Do you want to come help? I could use another set of hands. She blinked. Didn't expect that. No, she said. I'll send a list. Then she turned, blouse fluttering behind her like a flag of retreat. That weekend, I drove to the house. It looked smaller than I remembered. White paint chipped around the porch railings, the hydrangeas overgrown, but the wind chimes still hung by the front door, clinking softly, as if they hadn't missed a single year. Inside, it smelled like cedar and lavender, the same scent she used to tuck into drawers with her linens. I stood in the foyer for a long time, letting memory pull at me. I didn't cry. Not yet. The living room was frozen in time, doilies on every surface, family portraits spanning generations. A gold-rimmed frame of Simon's law school graduation next to a picture of Jen with her baby. No photo of me, but on the wall, near the bookshelf, I noticed something small and faded, my childhood drawing of a tree, framed in a wooden border. My name spelled incorrectly in crayon, Mara Ellison. She had kept it. I walked slowly through the house, opening drawers, closets, cabinets, touching everything like it might dissolve. Her sewing machine was still threaded, half a quilt folded on the table, a needle stuck in fabric like she'd only stepped away for a moment. In the bedroom, I found her jewelry box, still filled with modest brooches and Sunday necklaces. I picked up the gold locket she used to wear on holidays and opened it, 2 photos inside. One of me at age 6, missing teeth. The other of me at 20, cap and gown. The last time she came to see me, I sat on the edge of her bed and held the locket tight. That's when the tears came. Quiet, undramatic, but full. Years of wondering if I mattered collapsing in a room filled with proof that I had. Just hidden proof. Later that evening, I called Simon. He picked up after 2 rings. I'm at the house. I said, I found some of Mom's things. Thought you might want something. Silence on the line. Jen said you might send a list. I added, but I figured I'd ask you directly. He sighed. Honestly, I don't want anything. Are you sure? Yes. I think I need to let go. There was something raw in his voice. Not anger, just exhaustion. We didn't know what she wanted. He said. She didn't tell us anything. She told me. I said quietly. I know. I waited. But he didn't offer more. Well, I said, if you change your mind, I'll keep things safe. Thanks. He paused. I'm glad she saw you. He added. At the end, I almost told him about the drawing, the locket, the framed book cover in her sewing room. But I didn't. Some things were for me. That night, I slept in my childhood bedroom. Same lilac walls, same creaky ceiling fan. I curled up beneath a faded quilt she'd made when I was 12 and let the weight of the house settle around me. I dreamed of her humming in the kitchen, that low, steady hum that used to float between rooms like smoke. In the morning, I made coffee the way she did, stovetop, old school, with sugar and milk. I drank it on the porch while the sun rose over the fence, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was trespassing in my own life. I felt returned, like something long exiled had finally come home. The days that followed passed in a quiet rhythm. Mornings began with old music humming from her kitchen radio still working, still set to the same jazz station Mom always swore sounded better in the morning. I let it play, not because I liked it, but because silence in the house felt too final, too much like a goodbye. I spent my time sorting drawers of unopened letters, old birthday cards, tax documents, cassette tapes labeled with black marker. Every drawer I opened seemed to echo with something I'd forgotten: her neat handwriting, her habit of saving receipts from vacations we never repeated, her fondness for laminating even the most trivial things. The attic was the last place I avoided. Its ladder creaked when I pulled it down, the kind of sound that made your stomach tighten with something you couldn't name. Dust curled in the air like breath as I stepped into the dim space. Everything smelled like cedar and paper and mothballs. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, its pull chain brushing my forehead as I ducked through boxes. And then I saw it. A box labeled Mara in thick black letters. It was duct-taped shut, but the tape peeled easily. Inside were drawings, dozens of them. Ones I didn't remember giving her. Ones I thought had been thrown away. Crayon sketches, high school projects, college portfolio pieces, some of them clipped with sticky notes. Your line work is getting stronger. You've found your color voice. This made me cry. I sat down on the attic floor, stunned. There was a letter at the bottom, dated 3 years ago, unsent, folded in 3. I unfolded it with slow hands. Mara, I wish I knew how to say this to your face, but I always choke when it matters most. I've watched you grow into someone I can't control, and that scared me. You became wild, brave, artistic, stubborn, all the things I was too afraid to be. I made you feel like an outsider because I didn't know how to be the mother you needed. I hope one day you come back and see that I tried. Even if it didn't look like it, everything I kept was a way to keep you close. I love you, even when I didn't know how to show it. Mom, I didn't cry at first. I just sat there, fingers pressed against the paper, heart heavy in the kind of way that makes you quiet. Like someone just placed a small child into your arms and you're afraid to breathe too hard. I stayed in the attic until sunset. The next day, I got a message from a lawyer. A second meeting was needed regarding the estate. I wore black slacks, a plain blouse, no makeup. I didn't want to look like a woman who just inherited something. I wanted to look like someone who belonged. The office was beige and smelled like printer ink and old coffee. The lawyer, Mr. Hallen, wore a burgundy tie and greeted me with a nod. "There's something else your mother left behind," he said. "Not property. Something personal." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a document titled Burial Preferences, Louise Margaret Ellison. She didn't want a traditional grave, he said. She requested cremation, and that her ashes be released on the shore behind your grandfather's cabin in Greenwater. I blinked. The one in Maine. Yes. I hadn't been there since I was 12. That trip had ended in a storm, in a screaming match between Mom and Dad, and a broken lamp that shattered during dinner. The cabin was sold years ago. She included a note about you. He passed over a second page, handwritten in her familiar cursive, "Let Mara take me. She'll know the right time." L.E. She wanted me to take her ashes, I asked slowly. Yes. She left no other instructions. Just that. It didn't feel like an errand. It felt like a trust fall across years of silence. A week later, the urn was delivered. Small, silver, unmarked. I kept it in her sewing room beside the framed photo she'd kept of us. I didn't rush the trip. I didn't feel ready. And somehow, I knew she wouldn't have wanted me to treat it like a deadline. Instead, I started cleaning the house for real, not just dusting and organizing, deep cleaning, scrubbing the tile grout in the kitchen, washing the curtains, mopping the hardwood floors she used to wax every spring. In the guest room, I found old journals. Most were blank. One wasn't. It was from 1992. I was 8. Mara wore her overalls again today, stained with paint. She made a collage of birds with feathers she found in the yard. She says they speak to her. I laughed at her, then hated myself for laughing. She sees the world differently. I don't understand it, but I hope it doesn't get crushed out of her. Another entry. Mara left the dinner table early again. I told her she was rude. I didn't mean rude, I meant distant. I don't know how to pull her back. I don't know if I should. I read until I couldn't anymore. Then I lit a candle in the kitchen, just the way she used to on snow days. Vanilla scented. The same scent that used to mean safety. I finally drove to Greenwater 3 weeks later. It took 7 hours. The road curved along forests and quiet lakes. I stayed in a small motel off the highway and woke before sunrise. The cabin had long been sold to a new family, but I remembered the trail that led down to the shore behind it. That was still public land. That part still belonged to the woods, and to her. The air was sharp and filled with salt. The waves whispered more than they crashed. I stood on the rocky edge of the shore, urn in my arms, waiting for the right moment. I didn't say much, just whispered. I know you didn't always know how to love me, but I see it now. I see it in what you left behind. I opened the lid and let the wind take her. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't cinematic. It was just real. Ash spiraled out like thread pulled from the sky. Some settled on my jacket. Some disappeared over the tide. The rest was somewhere in between. I stood there until my toes went numb. Until the gulls circled once and moved on. And then I whispered the only goodbye I had ever meant. Thank you for remembering me. The drive back from Greenwater was quiet. No music, no podcasts, just the hum of the tires and the occasional wind slicing past the car like an invisible voice. I didn't feel lighter, exactly. Just stiller. Like something inside me had stopped struggling for air. When I pulled back into the driveway of Mom's house, the porch light clicked on automatically. That little motion sensor she'd had installed 10 years ago still worked like clockwork. The wind chimes tinkled a soft hello, and for the first time since she passed, the house didn't feel haunted, it felt waiting. I stepped inside with the urn's velvet box still in my bag, though it was empty now. Just an artifact. But I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. That night, I slept in the master bedroom. Her bedroom. I stood at the edge of her bed for a long time before sitting down. I didn't touch much, just lay there, eyes open, listening to the walls. They creaked in familiar places, like they were trying to remember me too. At 3 a.m., I woke up from a dream I couldn't remember. Heart racing and eyes damp. I wandered the house barefoot, past the dining room, into the hallway where the framed family tree hung. It was detailed, going back 4 generations. My name wasn't on it. I stared at the gap for a long time. There was Simon's branch, Jen's, even Rebecca's children penciled in, but not me. In a drawer nearby, I found the pen she used for everything important, blue ink. Extra fine tip. I thought about adding myself, but I didn't. Not yet. The next few weeks moved slowly, but I welcomed the pace. I worked remotely, commissions trickling in from old clients, and even picked up a few new ones. I set up a little art corner by the front window, the same spot where Mom used to arrange her sewing notions. It got good light. It felt right. One afternoon, while organizing her filing cabinet, I found a folder labeled simply, "If I Go." Inside were bank records, passwords, contact lists, even instructions for where she wanted specific things to go. It was all laid out with precision. She had left a note at the back to Mara. If you're reading this, then I didn't get to show you how much I've been trying, but I hope this makes it easier. Take the house. Make it yours. Or don't. But whatever you do, don't let them convince you you're alone. You weren't a mistake. You were just misunderstood. Mom. I held that letter against my chest and sat on the floor for almost an hour, not crying, not thinking, just holding. Later that night, I lit a candle in the window. I don't know why. Maybe to say something had changed. Maybe just so the house felt like someone lived here again. A few days later, Jen called. I didn't answer at first, just stared at her name on the screen as if it were a trick. But then I picked up. Mara, she said. I wasn't going to call. Yet here we are. There was a long pause. I went by the cemetery yesterday, she said. Didn't know Mom wasn't there. She didn't want to be. I know that now. But it felt strange, like she'd vanished. She didn't vanish. She chose. Another silence. I'm not calling to fight, Jen said. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I waited. For not telling you about the hospital. She continued. It wasn't right. We thought we were protecting her peace, but it was probably just easier to not deal with you. Thanks, I said, unsure whether to feel relief or bitterness. She left you everything, Jen said softly. But I think she left me something too, in a weird way. Oh, she left me regret. Enough of it that I have to carry it now. I didn't say anything. I hope the house brings you peace, she added. We didn't always give you much. That one landed. I swallowed. Thanks, Jen. Then she hung up. Not goodbye, not closure, but maybe the start of one less wall between us. Spring arrived slowly, with scattered petals and soft rain. I started planting a garden in the backyard. Nothing ambitious, just lavender, some herbs, a few daffodils. I used the same gardening gloves Mom used, the ones with the faded red trim and a little hole in the thumb. Every afternoon, I'd spend an hour in the dirt. It felt sacred, somehow, like kneeling to something older than apology. One morning, while weeding, I found a rusted tin box under the lilac bush. It was packed with old photos, black and white snapshots of my grandparents, my mother as a child holding a kitten, even a photo of me in the hospital nursery, red-faced and screaming. On the back, in her handwriting, she'd written Mara Jean, born screaming like she already had something to say. I laughed, alone in the dirt. Laughed so hard I had to sit down. Mom always knew how to nail the truth with a single sentence. I spent the rest of the day scanning the photos, arranging them into albums. Ones for Simon and Jen, ones for me, ones I didn't know how to categorize. There was healing in that. Quiet, undramatic healing, the kind that doesn't announce itself but lingers anyway. Later that week, I went into town for the first time in months, just to walk, maybe get coffee. I passed the bookstore where she used to buy me sketch pads. It had new owners now, but the creaky floorboards were the same. Inside, I found a blank journal with a soft leather cover. I bought it on impulse. That night, I began writing not letters to her, not diary entries, but memories, random ones. The time she taught me how to braid, the time I spilled paint on the new carpet and she didn't yell, the time she left a note in my lunchbox that said, "Don't let anyone make you smaller." I wrote one memory each day. I told myself I'd stop after 50. I didn't. One afternoon, as the sky turned the color of rain, I stood in the hallway and finally picked up the blue pen. I added my name to the family tree. Not because I needed to prove anything, not because it changed the past, but because I was tired of erasing myself from places I'd been all along. I wrote Mara Jean Ellison, artist, daughter, survivor. Then I drew a tiny bird beside my name. She would have noticed that. That summer was quiet in a way I didn't expect to enjoy. The kind of quiet that didn't ache anymore. Every morning, I made coffee and drank it in the backyard, barefoot in the grass Mom used to mow herself. The lavender I planted started blooming in gentle clusters, sending soft purple waves across the corner of the yard. The squirrels returned to their favorite tree, a pair of cardinals nested near the shed. Some days, I didn't speak to anyone at all. Not out of sadness, just because solitude, once something that echoed, had become a friend again. I'd never had that kind of relationship with silence before. The house began to feel lived in, but not changed. I didn't gut the place or repaint the walls. I didn't throw out the couch or replace the curtains. I kept her teacups where they were. I let the calendar on the fridge stay turned to the last month she touched March, even though it was already July. I wasn't preserving a shrine. I just wanted to coexist. And then one day, I heard a knock on the door. I opened it to find Simon standing there, holding a box. "Didn't know if I should call first?" he said. "You didn't," I replied, stepping aside. "But come in." He set the box on the kitchen counter and looked around like it was his first time seeing the house in color. "It looks the same," he said. "It is the same." He nodded. "I brought some stuff," he said, tapping the box. "Photos. Things I found when I was going through Dad's old storage unit. Stuff I thought you should have." I opened it slowly. Inside were childhood birthday cards, a copy of my college graduation program, and an envelope addressed in Dad's handwriting for Mara. "Whenever you're ready." I stared at it. Simon saw the hesitation. "I haven't opened it. Didn't feel right." I placed it on the table and poured us both some tea. Not because it was polite, but because Mom would have done the same. "I was angry for a long time," he said, after a few sips. "At you. At her. At how everything unfolded." "I know. But I think I was angrier that I didn't understand any of it." "I didn't either," I said. "Not then." He smiled sadly. "Jen's not ready to talk, but I am." That felt bigger than it sounded. We went through the box together. Laughed over my first drawing of a horse, which looked more like a melting dog. Talked about the year Mom made us matching sweaters for Christmas and how none of them fit. He showed me a photo of Mom from their trip to Paris, one I'd never seen, where she stood at the Seine, smiling in a way I didn't remember. When he left, he stood on the porch for a long time. "I always assumed she didn't love you the way she loved us," he said. "I don't think that's true anymore." "It wasn't true," I said. Then I hugged him, and for the first time since the funeral, something softened. That night, I opened Dad's envelope. Inside was a short letter. "Mara, I wasn't good at parenting. I thought rules were love. I thought silence was strength. But when you left, something went quiet in this family and no one had the courage to name it. I hope one day you find your way back to your name. It was always yours. Dad." Underneath the letter was my birth certificate. I had a copy already, but this one had been folded, handled, worn. He'd carried it with him. My name was underlined. I ran my finger under it like tracing the edge of a map. Mara Jean Ellison. Mine. No one had said it out loud in a long time. August came, and the garden burst into color. Tomatoes ripened. Basil grew wild. I even managed a few cucumbers, which I sliced thin and ate with salt like Mom used to do when I was a kid. The neighbors started waving more often. One afternoon, Mrs. Dellinger brought over a pie and a folder of old photos. "I found these in the garage," she said. "Your mother would have wanted you to have them." We sat on the porch, flipping through shots from block parties, school plays, snowstorms. In one, I was standing in the driveway with a lemonade stand, face smudged with marker. Mom stood behind me, arms crossed but smiling. "She always said you were the brave one," Mrs. Dellinger said. She never told me that. She didn't know how. We sat in silence for a while, watching the wind move the leaves. Before she left, she placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'm glad you came back," she said. "So am I." One day, I found myself drawing Mom's sewing room, not the literal version, but a memory of it, the way it felt. Light streaming through the lace curtain, spools of thread stacked like candy. Her silhouette hunched over the machine with a pin between her teeth. I worked on the sketch for days. Then I turned it into a painting. Then another. By September, I had 6 pieces. An art friend of mine saw them and said, "You need to show these." "I don't think they're for showing," I replied. But she persisted, and I relented. We arranged a small local exhibit titled Unspoken Rooms. It wasn't packed, but it was warm. A handful of neighbors came. Simon brought his girlfriend. Even Rebecca came, though she didn't stay long. She smiled softly at the first painting, then slipped away without saying much. I didn't need more than that. At the end of the exhibit, someone asked, "So who was she?" And for the first time, I answered without fear. She was my mother. Complicated, strong, silent. And sometimes, she remembered me when I thought I'd been erased. The woman nodded, then walked away. I stood alone in front of the final painting, a lone window with light filtering through lace, illuminating nothing but a sewing chair. That's how I remembered her best. Half present, still working, still here. Fall came with its rust-colored leaves and early dusk. I didn't move out, didn't sell, didn't change the mailbox. I stayed, and slowly, the house began to shift not away from her, but toward me. I let the past stay on the walls, but I added my own stories too. A framed print of my Paris show next to her quilt. My sketches hanging in the hallway beside the family tree. New names might be added someday. Or maybe not. Maybe mine is enough. The first snow came early that year. It dusted the hydrangeas with a hush so complete I paused mid-step on the porch. Breath fogging in the air. Mug of tea warming both hands. The town looked like it had exhaled and frozen in the stillness. Even the birds were quiet. I watched flakes settle on the wind chimes, softening their usual jangle into a shy clink. Somewhere inside the house, a radiator ticked on with a long, low sigh. Winter was always her favorite. She used to say snow gave the world a second chance, covered the mess, made everything soft again. Now, it covered our house, mine, and hers. I spent the morning unpacking the last of her boxes. They'd been sitting in the hall closet, waiting, as if the contents inside might change if I just waited long enough. But time doesn't transform objects. It only sharpens their outlines. The first box was filled with fabrics, scraps of velvet, lace, linen. Each one folded carefully, bundled with a note sleeves, lining, buttons. She'd labeled everything like someone preparing for a future project that never got made. A life paused mid-stitch. At the bottom, I found a dress. Dark green. Heavy. Half-finished. The needle still stuck in the hem. I held it up to the light. It was beautiful. Why hadn't she finished it? I spread it across the dining table, smoothing every wrinkle. For the rest of the day, I sewed. I didn't know what I was doing, but it didn't matter. I followed the threads she left behind. I let my hands become hers. By nightfall, the dress was complete, and I cried not for her death, but for the thousands of tiny, quiet ways she had tried to speak. A few days later, I received a letter, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, and on it I saw your show. She would have been proud. J. I knew the handwriting, knew it from childhood birthday cards and apology notes that always came 2 weeks late. Jen. No explanation, no phone call, just that. I folded it once and slid it into the photo album marked Family, the one I'd created in Mom's sewing room, now converted into my own studio. That was the thing about grief sometimes. It spoke in direct words, sometimes in small envelopes, but always in time. By January, I had a rhythm: coffee by 7, drawing by 9, walk by noon, tea by 4, sketch again after dinner. The routines didn't feel like discipline, they felt like stitching a self back together. I started receiving more emails from galleries. Word had spread about unspoken rooms. A museum in Portland wanted to show 2 pieces. A local magazine wrote a small feature. But I didn't move to the city. Didn't chase the momentum. I stayed. Because here, I could feel her most. Not as an echo, but as presence. Not haunting, but inhabiting. She was in the drawer that stuck slightly, in the hallway light that flickered if you turned it on too quickly, in the pile of teacups I couldn't bear to part with. She was in the way the floor creaked in front of the stove. She was in the radio, still tuned to jazz. One afternoon, while cleaning the basement, I found an old cassette player. I didn't think much of it until I realized there were tapes, dozens stacked in a basket nearby. Some were labeled by year, others by name. One was labeled 4M. My fingers shook a little as I pressed play. Her voice came through faint, crackling, familiar. Mara, I don't know if you'll ever hear this. Maybe I'm too afraid to say it out loud. Maybe writing it down felt too final. But I needed a way to talk to you without needing to be right. She laughed, soft and short. I was wrong about a lot of things. About how I handled your leaving. About why you left. I thought it was rebellion. I thought it was punishment. But now I see it was survival. You needed air, and I built a house with no windows. She paused. I kept things. I watched your name in print. I even followed your art blog, the one you don't think anyone reads. I smiled. This house was never meant to be a cage, but it became one. For all of us. I just hope that when I'm gone, it can become something else. A garden again, a window, a home. Don't forgive me out of pity. Forgive me because I tried, and because you still walked through the door when you didn't have to. Silence. Then a whisper. I love you. Even when I couldn't say it. Even when I made it hard for you to stay. I stopped the tape and sat in the dark for a long time, holding the machine against my chest like a heart that beat outside of time. I didn't need more than that. She'd said what I needed to hear, even if she hadn't been able to say it to my face. The next morning, I went to the shed behind the house and pulled out an old signpost. I sanded it down, painted it white, and nailed it to the front yard beside the mailbox. Then I wrote in careful letters, the Ellison House. Not just a name, not just ownership, but belonging. As spring crept in again, I found myself inviting people over. Simon came for dinner. We ate soup and talked about our dad, how strict he was, how funny he could be when no one was watching, how much he missed Mom, even though he never said it out loud. Mrs. Dellinger started dropping by once a week with cookies and clippings from her garden. We'd sit on the porch, listening to the wind in the trees, pretending we weren't waiting for anything. And one afternoon, Jen came. She didn't call. She just knocked. I opened the door, surprised but not shocked. She stood there with a tin of lemon bars and a very tentative smile. I figured it was time, she said. Time for what? To come in. I stepped aside. She looked around slowly, eyes sweeping across the rooms, the walls, the way the light landed across the floorboards. Her hand brushed the arm of Mom's favorite chair. You didn't change much, she said. I didn't need to. She nodded. We sat in the kitchen, side by side, saying little. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. She picked at the edge of the lemon bar, then finally asked, Did she really leave you everything? I paused. Yes. Jen looked at the table, not angry, just processing. Then she said something I didn't expect. She would have hated us fighting like this. Yeah, I replied, but she also created it. She did. Jen agreed, and maybe we let her. We sat for a long time. Then she said, I don't want the house. I don't want anything in it. But I do want to stop pretending you weren't part of us. That landed like a gift. I'd like that too. She stayed for tea. She helped me water the garden. She didn't hug me goodbye, but I didn't need her to. The door had opened. That was enough. Later that evening, I walked through the house barefoot, touching the walls lightly as I went. The light was dim. The air smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. I paused at the family tree, and I saw something. Beneath my name, in small handwriting, someone had added daughter, artist, keeper of the thread. I didn't write it, but someone did. And this time, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt seen. The following weeks passed in a quiet rhythm that no longer felt like mourning. The house had settled into its own breath, like a body no longer bracing for pain. I kept the windows open in the mornings, letting the wind sift through the curtains and carry out the weight that had lived in the walls for far too long. And for the first time in years, I began to sleep without waking up at 3 a.m., without the lingering feeling that I'd missed something, forgotten someone, or left something unsaid. One morning in early May, I received a letter from the Historical Preservation Society. They wanted to include the Ellison House on their local walking tour, a landmark of generational memory. They wrote, with cultural significance due to the family's legacy and artistic contributions. I nearly laughed aloud. Legacy. We were a family built on held tongues, avoided questions, Sunday dinners where feelings were steamed out like overcooked vegetables. And yet, I found myself saying yes. If people wanted to walk past the house and feel something even if they didn't know what, they were welcome to it. I spent that week tidying the porch, repainting the front steps, and scrubbing the mailbox till it gleamed, not to impress, just to make it ready. For memory, for strangers, for whoever passed through this world trying to find a place where things still stood. A few days after that, I hosted a dinner. Nothing fancy, a pot of soup, a loaf of bread, and a table set for 6. Simon came again, this time with Rebecca and her toddler. The child Ella ran barefoot through the hallway, shrieking with joy as if she belonged here, which, in some way, she did. Jen arrived late, carrying a bouquet of tulips and a bottle of wine. We didn't hug, but she smiled when I opened the door, and I didn't flinch when she stepped into the living room and looked at Mom's photo on the mantel. We ate slowly, like people who had learned the value of not rushing. Rebecca asked about the sewing room. I told her I'd turned it into my art studio, but left the quilt rack where it was. She said she'd love to see it. I said yes. As the night waned and the sky deepened into indigo, the conversation turned quieter. Jen stood up, poured herself another glass of wine, then walked to the bookshelf near the hallway. She ran her fingers over the spines, stopped at the family photo album, and pulled it out. I haven't looked through this in years, she said, thumbing the corner. Go ahead, I said. She sat on the couch and opened it carefully, as if she were touching something fragile. Then, very softly, she laughed. This one, she said, showing a photo of all 3 of us on the back porch in our Halloween costumes, me as a ghost with 2 short sheets, Simon as a cowboy, Jen as a glittering fairy. You were always the strange one. I smiled. Still am. But maybe that wasn't a bad thing. Her voice cracked on the last word. No one spoke for a moment. Then Ella giggled in the hallway, chasing dust particles in a beam of light. And the moment passed like a leaf carried gently across the floor. That night, after everyone left, I stood in the kitchen barefoot, candle flickering beside the sink, and washed the dishes one by one. I didn't use the dishwasher not out of stubbornness, but because this felt closer, felt like her. I dried the last plate and turned off the light. And then, for reasons I still don't fully understand, I walked to the attic. The ladder creaked the same way. The bulb still swayed when I pulled the chain. I sat on the floor in front of the box labeled Mara, pulling the drawings out one by one. I didn't cry. I didn't freeze. I just sat. Each piece held a memory I'd forgotten. Each sticky note, a voice I hadn't known was reaching for me. I picked up one sketch I barely remembered me, age 15. Looking over my shoulder at something behind me. The lines were rough, the perspective awkward. But she'd written, "She's learning to see what others miss." I pressed that piece to my chest and closed my eyes. And for a moment, it felt like her hand was on my shoulder again, just resting there, not correcting, not guiding, just being. The following weekend, I visited the Community Art Center downtown. I'd donated a few old pieces there before, but this time I came with a new idea. A workshop. Not a lecture. Not a show. A gathering. I called it Inherited Hands, a place where people could bring unfinished work from family members and finish it together. Quilts, drawings, woodworking, half-written letters. The center agreed instantly. We scheduled it for June. It filled up in a week. People came with their fathers' journals, mothers' poetry drafts, unpainted canvases, and boxes of untold things. We spread them out on tables. We worked beside each other in silence and occasional laughter. One woman embroidered her grandmother's final dress. Another finished a lullaby her father had started and never sung. I brought the green dress. And I brought the painting I made of Mom's sewing room. I didn't explain either. I didn't need to. One evening, after a long day in the studio, I stepped into the backyard and sat beside the garden. The lavender had returned in full bloom, and the herbs had taken over half the bed. I liked it that way, untamed, a little wild, a little too much. It reminded me of myself. I watched the wind ripple through the trees, listened to the cicadas tuning up in the dusk. The air was warm, the world soft. Then I looked up and saw the light on in her room. I froze. No one else was in the house. No timers, no tricks. Just the light. And then, slowly, it dimmed. I stood and walked inside, climbed the stairs, opened the door. The light was off. Nothing moved. But on the windowsill, a single button rested, a red one, flat and shiny. I knew it hadn't been there before, and I smiled, because sometimes, when something loves you enough, it stays, not as a ghost, but as a signal that you're seen, that you're held, that you're still connected. Later that night, I sat at the dining room table, the one she'd always set too formally, and opened my sketchbook. I drew a chair, then I drew another one beside it, empty, but waiting, and underneath. I wrote, "For the ones who kept trying, even when no one saw." That would be the final piece in my new series. Not a showstopper, not flashy, just honest. Like her, like me.